This is a lecture from OpenTuition.
Question 3 deals with the company's risk register and the mitigation processes for reducing risk to acceptable levels. And there's been a bit of a disagreement between the chairperson and the CEO as to the adequacy of this register. And we're to prepare a confidential report which evaluates the current risk register and the adequacy of each risk mitigating activity, clearly indicating were the chairman's concerns justified. And the chairperson, has concerned that the risk register does not adequately evaluate the seriousness of the risks identified, and some may not be covered at all, and also that the risk mitigation activities are inadequate. Now, it's a slightly badly worded question. I don't think in this they mean you to add new items to the risk register, even though it's saying here may not contain certain risks at all. I think it's talking about should it be a risk? Is it right for this risk to be in the risk register? And in particular, are the risk mitigating activities adequate in light of the potential seriousness of the risk? Are they adequate to deal with that risk? And it's always useful to look at the professional skills marks here. And in here you'll see that the professional skills marks are to do with skepticism. And skepticism really means that you don't want to believe things. You don't just accept that somebody says, oh, it's okay, there's no problem. You want to be picking away at that and really identifying where they may be too self-satisfied, too optimistic. So I think that's probably the thrust of it here. If you can identify, in particular in the risk mitigating activities, where these are inadequate, then I think that's really what's wanted. There may be additional things to add about potential impact. There may be other potential impacts which we want to put in as well. I think that would be a fair thing to do in the terms of this question. So the first of the risk is fundraising pressures, insufficient income to cover expenditure, reputational risks because of the methods used to raise funds, risk mitigating activities here. Well, two of them deal with costs, really. Implementation of appropriate cost budgeting procedures and monitoring the adequacy of financial returns achieved. Neither of those directly raises the risk, which is that we're going to get less income. And I think just looking after costs is all well and good, but the prime problem is not the cost being too high, it's maybe being that the income is too low. And part of the risk mitigating activities should be to try to increase the methods of raising funds and the amounts also raised. I'd also suggest that the way they, I think, are mitigating the reputational risk, potential reputational risk, is that they report fundraising activities to stakeholders in the annual report. I suspect that's too late. That the annual report could come out easily 15 months after the period. And I think what we need to maybe do to avoid reputational damage is to have more frequent examinations of fundraising activities, or maybe before a new fundraising activity is embarked on, that we have that cleared by the trustees. We have a kind of independent look at it to make sure it's not going to be upsetting anyone or leading to reputational damage. So I think there's a little bit of inadequacy certainly in the risk mitigating activities. Loss of key staff, where we're going to experience, lose experience and skills. There's going to be an operational impact on animal protection. That's fair. I put in an extra one there. If you lose key staff, you have to replace key staff, and there are costs involved in doing that, finding the right people, recruiting them, training them, and so on. How could we mitigate the risk, because we're always going to lose people? Well, succession planning, we could have, that's okay, agreed periods of notice, that's okay, so that we're not too surprised by this. Review annual recruitment processes and policies, that's okay. But maybe what we could do is to enhance training. We could review pay rates to make sure that they are reasonably competitive. We could say that during our presumably annual meetings with people, staff reviews and so on, we listen to their concerns, and if somebody expresses a particular interest in a particular type of work within the charity, that as far as possible we try to give them experience in that. That we increase, if you like, almost the motivation of people to stay with us could be set up as a reasonable additional step to take. Increased competition in the sector. There'd be a loss of income from presumably charities and membership, maybe reduced public profile because we're having to compete with other people as well. I think that probably captures the main risks coming from increased competition. What are we going to do? We could suggest monitor methods of service delivery and monitor public awareness and profile. All this monitoring seems to be a bit laid back. I think we need to do more than monitoring. We need to probably be a bit more proactive. That if there's increased competition, we know it's going to hurt us. We need to be ahead of the game. We need to, as in a previous question, maybe set up more social media presence and more e-marketing and so more educational videos available on YouTube or something of that type. So I think they're maybe being a bit too laid back on fighting the competition for what's going to be a limited amount of money available for this particular sector. Operating in dangerous locations in the world, staff, volunteers are injured or killed carrying out their responsibilities. And there could be, as well, I would put another potential impact on their reputational damage. If you have people killed in a wildlife park, then it may encourage the public to say, well, I'm not going to contribute to that particular organisation because they're not taking proper care of their staff. I would add that one in. The suggested risk mitigating activities, monitor and review activities in recognised dangerous locations and procedures to remove staff at short notice. It's okay. So if a hurricane was coming along or floods or something of that type, we need some sort of rescue procedures. Closely work with local security and safety services. That's good. They'll be able to warn us. Regular training so that staff members identify dangerous situations and are able to avoid getting into those or can, kind of get out of those. You could put in here also maybe to make sure the communication is good, that if somebody is in a remote location looking after animals, tracking animals, or whatever their job is, that they always have some sort of radio contact where they can quickly alert rescuers to particular problems. You could easily put that in, but it's I think not a bad question there. But skepticism is your key into this here. And generally speaking, when you're looking at these professional skills marks, they will give you a clue as to where you should be looking. Persuasiveness, evaluation, communication skills, and so on. are all helpful to know about.